Recording in progress.
Start. Okay, good evening. This is a work session of the Greenbelt City Council. My name is Emmett Jordan. I serve as mayor. I'm joined by my fellow council members, Mayor Pro Tem.
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jenny Pompey, council member.
Amy Niesel, council member.
Daniel McKinney, council member.
Silky Pope, council member. Sorry.
Rodney Roberts, City Council.
Okay, so we're going to start off with information item regarding the reassignment of the career firefighters. So on Thursday, the Greenbelt City Council voted to seek an injunction and temporary restraining order to stop the county from removing career firefighters from engine company number 35. The health and safety of our residents was and is our primary concern. The issues of collaboration and transparency between municipalities and the county around public safety decisions, that's also at the heart of our decision to seek a temporary restraining order and injunction. So we were first notified about this proposal on June the 7th. We got an official letter from Fire Chief Green. However, Chief Tommy Ray of the Greenbelt Volunteer Fire and Rescue Squad got a phone call the night of Tuesday, the June the 4th, and I also got a call on the 5th. So we didn't get a letter until the 7th. So this summer staffing plan went into effect on yesterday at 7 a.m. A total of 30 career firefighters were removed from Greenbelt and Berwyn Heights with no specific end date that was provided. The county has stated that this plan, summer plan, will be reevaluated in October, but we haven't really received any metrics or any information that would be used to reevaluate the staffing plan. So I'll read the joint statement went out. With the injunction and the temporary restraining order, Berwyn Heights and the City of College Park joined us in this action. So the restraining order, do you have that handy? Do you want to read that?
Do you want the first one or the one that came out today?
The one that came out today.
Okay. On June, so this is a joint public statement on the Prince George's County Fire Department EMS staffing circuit court decision on temporary restraining order filing. On June 28th, 2024, the City of Greenbelt, the Town of Berwyn Heights, and the City of College Park filed a temporary restraining order, TRO, in response to the Prince George's County Fire Staffing Reallocation Plan that would reassign career personnel from Fire EMS Stations 814 Berwyn Heights and Fire EMS Station 835 Greenbelt on June 30th. Today, the Prince George's County Circuit Court held a hearing and denied the TRO. We are disappointed our request was denied, but are committed to working with officials to ensure the safety of our residents and emergency personnel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
So, Council, we want to assure the public that we're taking every step we possibly can to assure the safety of Greenbelters and those in the surrounding communities. City Manager Salmarone, can you say a couple of words about the short-term steps that we're taking? Also, I want to point out that we have a council meeting coming up on Monday, and this action will be on the agenda on Monday. And this is a work session tonight. We cannot take actions, but City Manager Salmarone can talk about what we've done.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we've been working on this matter since just a few days before the official letter arrived, because word spread rather quickly about this proposed change. At the time it was proposed, or we considered proposed, but it seemed that it was decided and the county intended to move forward with it, as we have seen in the last 24 hours. So we've done everything that we can up to this point. We explore our options, buying medical equipment. We have ordered AEDs, automatic external defibrillators. So I spoke with the CEO this morning of the company Rescue One, who's providing the equipment. They'll be personally delivered or by an individual from the warehouse in Maryland to us tomorrow morning 4 of those units are going into police cruisers, so that at least 4 police cruisers on shift are carrying an AED, so that they're available to our personnel. The other 4 are going in facilities. So we'll add additional AEDs in existing facilities where we have them, and we'll put one at the co-op, so that they are available in the community. The ones that are going to be available in facilities are bilingual, in Spanish and English. So that's taking place tomorrow. On other options, we've looked at incentivizing volunteers. We continue to explore the staff augmentation, which is something that we discussed briefly in a work session on, I believe it was June 5th, that we had the work session with council. We had Chief Ray here when council asked us what are the things, the options that are available to us. So since June 5th, we've been exploring that opportunity. We've discussed it with the county, and there's some barriers there, but we intend to do all within our means to provide emergency services to our residents. So we'll continue to explore that front and work with the county to ensure that we have more resources than we currently have. The other items, I think that they should wait until we're able to speak about them publicly, such as what are the next steps from the legal actions we've taken. Obviously, we're disappointed that the TRO was denied, but there are options that council have, and we should not talk about those publicly until we have had an opportunity to discuss them in closed session, as we are allowed to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, we remain dedicated to finding a balanced approach that serves the best interests of everyone in our community, the surrounding communities, and to continue talking with the county. We are still hoping that they will reconsider, working with our neighboring College Park, Berwyn Heights, and other municipalities. It's just a very unfortunate situation. Just having enough time to respond to a decision like this, three weeks is not enough time, particularly when we don't have the full picture of what is happening countywide. So it's hard for us to guarantee the health and safety of our residents without having that total picture. And that's why that dialogue between the county and the municipalities, in this case, Greenbelt, Berwyn Heights, and the other municipalities, Bowie and College Park, is really, really important. So we'll talk about some of this at the next council meeting on Monday. We may need to have additional executive sessions because there's some things we can't really talk about before we do.
I want to reiterate that we've approached this in a collaborative manner. We've tried having other conversations with anyone who listened and is able to do anything about this at the county and surrounding municipalities. We're not alone in this. As you can see for the TRO, we have 2 partner municipalities joining us, and there's more that have expressed interest that are willing to join and want to join our effort. So if there's any relief in this, is that we're not alone in this.
Hey, thank you so much. Ms. Pope?
Yeah, but it's also very unfortunate that they are not allowing us to have the ambulance service that they were promising publicly, that they stated would be stationed here. I think from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. And now after all this, they've taken that away, and I think they stationed it at Glendale.
So earlier today, the ambulance was stationed in Greenbelt. Then it was reallocated around 9 something in the morning to Glendale, but it did come back into service in Greenbelt this afternoon. So I think.
Do we know if it's staying here, or what's the plan for that ambulance?
I have not had a chance to speak with Chief Green or Deputy Chief McCullen on this, but from their public statement, they committed to designating the paramedic unit in Greenbelt.
Correct. Correct.
So I can't speak to what their plans are. I hope that they intend to honor their commitment made publicly to Greenbelt and the residents, and I hope that this is just a short-lived reassignment. The unit is back in Greenbelt this afternoon, so I hope it remains so.
Yeah, I hope so too, because it would look really, it wouldn't look very good if they would now pull it after our hearing this morning.
Right.
I don't want to turn this into a tit for tat. This should not go that route, because this is a serious issue for us. Thank you.
So let me just say, I did stop by the firehouse at about 9 o'clock yesterday morning just to see how things were going. And Lisa and two other firefighters, Greenbelt firefighters, volunteers were there. But as you said, we don't really have a clear idea of exactly what some of this moves, just in terms of surge. They talked about surge ambulances being available at the county, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. So we'll wait and see. But we are grateful to our volunteer firefighters. And also grateful to the career firefighters. They do a whole lot. They deserve vacations. They deserve to not be forced to have mandatory overtime. So it's an ongoing situation, but we'll talk about it in detail on Monday. So that's the information item. Are there other information items? I'd like to, at this time, go back to the agenda and delve into the work session for tonight, which has to do with the council work plan. Just back up here for a second. So I want to thank Councilmember McKinney for putting together a context, some additional thinking into the conversation that we're going to have tonight. In the packet is the document 2024 Greenbelt City Council Planning Framework. It says final, but you know, a framework is a plan. So, you know, it's an ongoing plan. Let me just read the summary if I can. In November 2023, the city of Greenbelt elected its 45th city council, which included 2 new council members. And then in late January, council member Rick Gordon passed away, and Amy Niesel was appointed to fill the 2-year term. So it's been our tradition for a pretty good number of years to actually sit down at the beginning of each term, council term, and talk a little bit about our shared goals and kind of formulate them into a work plan. So this framework is following up on the retreat that we had on January 27th and a work session on April the 2nd. So the purpose of the framework and actually arriving at a work plan was to actually, you know, come up with a framework focusing council's priority goals to focus on over a 2-year elected term. So it's a tool that we need, in fact, to effectively inform the city manager of what council's priorities are. And that's based on what we hear from the public. And also, this framework is a tool to track the impact of city programs and services to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all Greenbelt residents. So, Councilmember McKinney, would you like to talk a little bit about the framework before we kind of dive into the conversation? I got to tell you, you know, there's been so much going on. I've not been able to focus as much as I'd like to on this, and I'm sure that's the case with all of council. Most of council, some of council.
I completely agree. I think, you know, we started working on this framework some months ago as a way to try to help collectively and collaboratively figure out a way to ensure that we're hearing from the public, that we're collecting the information that we need to have so that we can make informed decisions when we need to make those decisions. And this even came before our budget work sessions that we have. So this has been, you know, a process that has been going on for a few months. And obviously over the past few weeks, we have had some pretty significant priorities that we've had to focus on. And I'm hoping, and I think all of us are hoping, that by putting together a framework, we can better address certain things when they do come up, especially things like what we've been dealing with for the past couple of weeks when we have, you know, a really significant and time-sensitive thing that we need to address. So in the packet, you have the document that was basically a summary of what came from the council retreats from part 1 and part 2. We had 2 parts of those. And so the idea was simply to summarize everything that we heard from every council member. And a lot of that, what was expressed, were things that council members heard from the community, either from going to events, going to different meetings, or even in our work sessions. So those priorities, or those the information that was included in that summary was really a summary of priorities from the community. So.
So, with regard to the timing of this and the timing of the retreats, Mayor Pro Tem in particular was passionate about making sure that we had this retreat, a planning retreat, as soon as possible after the election, because there's a cycle, there's a budget cycle, and to the extent that the council is not in a position to give direction to the city manager, then priorities of things that we hear from the public at Roosevelt Center or Greenbelt Station or in Greenbelt East or wherever, they do not necessarily rise to the top. So my thinking, every 2 years it's important to do this, but every year, I think we should actually check in with the plan. And then as we have our quarterly meetings with the city manager, I think, the priorities that we've outlined to some extent, just in terms of objectives, some of those should always be revisited in our conversations with the city manager. So that's my concept of the process and the timing. Anybody else want to comment on that, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I also very much appreciate Danielle, all the hard work she put into kind of bringing everything together. And I think we hear a lot of feedback from people, and I think that one of the reasons why it was important to me to get that done quickly, which unfortunately, I mean, we had it planned when Rick passed, and then of course had to reschedule it because it should have been him helping us do this. I wish it were, but it's just, I think, one of the getting a chance, we have a lot of pretty new council members. We did even then, Rick and I at that point were only 2 years in, and then we had 2 brand new council members. And I think we all have different ideas and things. And so it was really important to me to try to get a conversation going. And I think I'm glad that we were able to do those couple of sessions. I think there's always more work in planning. I think one of the things that Danielle and I have talked about is there's things that are sort of the city's objectives, and some of those that go into the MBO, the different department objectives. But I think there's also the element of it of which our actions council should be doing, and how we can make the council workflow better in support of these priorities. Because I think there are some of these things, and you'll notice looking at the list, some of these things are very clearly staff actions, things that that city staff in one way or another are going to do. But then there's also some things that I think council can do to support those actions, and separating what is our role and what is the city managers and the city staff's role is useful. And so I hope we can continue to have those conversations, because I mean, I think you got I like to be efficient and do things, and I like to have goals and purposes and have reasons for doing things, not just doing it the way that we've done it, but just think about, is this the best way to get to our end goals? And I think we all have a lot of things that we want to do. So how do we get there?
That's all good points. So, as you said, some items are administrative, other items, arguably, I mean, we have things that are strategic, but also, some of the objectives are more like tactics. I used to play a lot of chess. You have your strategies and objectives, and underneath that, you have your tactics, your short-term moves. So somehow, as we look at these and talk about them, we can kind of drill down and isolate the ones that are most important to raise up for the city manager to operationalize. So I think that's how we have to kind of go about it. Council members, do you have some additional ideas, Ms. Niesel?
I want to echo everyone's statements that thank you so much to Councilmember McKinney for putting this together. I have found that one of the hardest parts of being on council is trying to figure out what is the best use of our time, and having this as a guiding document is invaluable.
Ms. Pope, Ms. Pompey, Mr. Roberts?
No, I think, yeah, thank you, Danielle, for putting all the time in. I know and the document is really good once I get to it. Once I can get to it again. Yeah, I do. Look, this is always what happens to me. But no, thank you. And of course, I think it's important for us to get together and work on this together. That's very true. Everybody's statement was right on the button. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just agree with everyone. I appreciate all the work Danielle put put into this, and I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of how council came together to work on this and to sort of find ways in which our priorities came together. And I feel like the process was very good, and I'm glad we were able to do that. And it makes me feel confident in us as a body moving forward, and helping direct the city and the future, the Greenbelt's future. So I feel really good about that.
And Rick Gordon he would have said it, or as he did say it so often, it's all about finding common ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If you wouldn't mind, there are a few things that I added, and so that are actually listed in the agenda packet. So I think what we were just reading off of was the attachment. And then in the actual agenda, I had added in basically some guiding questions. And these were some of the questions that I think hopefully captured some of the things that we were thinking about as we were trying to work on this framework. And so some of those guiding questions were, how do we come together to really define what those strategic priorities are? So Josue has done a great job in going through the budget and sort of articulating that. But to your point, we were also very new. So we would logically have something like that would guide that process. But if we can be moving forward, have some type of document that really clearly articulates what we've heard from the community, that will guide that budget process, guide also when we go into the next legislative session, as well as thinking about all of the different community engagement things that we know that are important to the community that we can be at. So those were some of the things that we were thinking about, one of them. And then to your point, there are sort of strategic priorities, and then there are those things that are tools. Those tools that we can use to help make sure that we're doing and can show progress on the things that we have said, these are our priorities. So obviously the budget is one of those, but there might be other things. And I know Mr. Samarone has talked about, do we have an annual report that is maybe different from our budget? Do we have the city manager's report, but are there other things that really can clearly articulate some of the things that not only council is doing, but staff is doing, so that we create greater communication and transparency with our community? And I know that those are also some of the priorities that have been outlined, especially in the JEDI work, is how do we document some of the things that we do as a council and as a city. And then finally, how do we talk about what are some of the milestones? So when we're getting to our budget, what are the things that we want to actually make sure we're achieving throughout the year? And the budget should guide where we're putting our funding and putting our priorities, but we should be able to clearly articulate what those milestones are based on what we had already outlined in that preliminary document. So those are some of those guiding questions. And then, later in that packet, I just kind of put some ideas around what some of those tools might be.
Yeah, I wanted to in terms of context. So the first, when we had done these exercises previously, the framework that was developed actually grew directly out of community visioning. We had a large community visioning session. It's been quite some time since we did that, but the broad categories that were embodied in the quote unquote work plan were actually directly from that visioning, and from there we kind of developed, based on things change and based on what people are saying, there are shifts and whatnot. So I just want to point out that the community, to me, and I think to all of us, what we hear as individuals, we all have different networks. Some of them overlap, some of them don't necessarily. But the having a formalized community visioning session where we do as comprehensive as outreach as we possibly can, needs to be an important part of how we move forward. This year's different, COVID was different also, just threw everything off quite a bit. Please proceed.
So on the second page of the agenda packet, I put in there some possible tools which really was just a starting place. It was a way for us to not just start from a blank sheet of paper, but it was really like, okay, well, what could this look like? What would this look like if we were to actually build out some of these tools? And would they actually be helpful in kind of documenting and curating some of the work that we're doing as a council and as a city? So I'll try to take one of these as an example, and then maybe we can use some of it to have a further conversation about. If that makes sense. I know that we've heard on many occasions, so we already do a schedule on our website of different events that are going on in the city. But that doesn't always articulate some of the things that council is going to, that are involved in. And we do have a council activities report that we report out on at the end of each council work session. And so I think the great thing is that I think we're all capturing it and putting it in one place, but we could also be a little bit maybe more proactive to list the things that we are going to be going to, and then be able to think, because we might need to, there's just so many things going on in the city, right? And so how can we make sure that we are covering, and there is at least council representation as many as possible things that are going on. And so maybe there could be an opportunity to look at that activities report that we already report out on, and then maybe the month prior put out, okay, here are all of the activities that we know are coming up. This is who will be attending that, so that then also the stakeholders also know who to expect and who would be representing the council at that time. That is just an idea, but I was trying to use that as an example of how we might be able to, try to reach more than we might be doing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, above and beyond what we do in the city, the external relationships are really important. That's where it gets a little scattered, because we're going to different meetings representing the city. We don't always have time to report back in a comprehensive kind of way. Hey, Mr. Robertson, and also to Mr. Orleans, we're going to take comments a little bit later in the meeting. So I definitely see you. So we're going to circle back. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, I appreciate it. I was just wondering, how do you think this squares with our budget wise? I mean, I see a lot of stuff in here, that we can do, different ideas and stuff, but every one of them costs money and takes time. So, and when we have a budget already, so we can't just all of a sudden decide we're going to do a bunch of stuff that we don't have money for. So how are we going to reconcile that?
That's a really great, and I think one of the things that we need to think about when determining which of these tools makes the most sense. I think there are some things that we're already doing. We simply need to formalize them maybe a little bit more. Some of them, I think a lot of them actually don't require as much money as they need to. Some do, clearly, and we'll probably need to make some decision around that. But maybe we look at those things that maybe are the lower hanging fruit in the next year to say, okay, here are the 5 things out of these ideas that we are going to sort of formalize and put into how we work to be able to better inform next year's planning framework, which then goes into our budget.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think Danielle said it a little bit, but I think if you look through many of these things, many of them are things that are already in our budget, that sort of reiterating that those are something we heard as important. And some of them are things that don't actually have a budget item. I'm just looking over it, like increase the number of young adults participating in city boards and committees. that's not something that has a budget cost. That just has to do with thinking about how we can reach out and get some of these young people, because I know our youth advisory board is really low on numbers right now. So what are the things that we can do to increase those participants, or on other boards? So I think part of it, Rodney, is that some of these things are budget items. Some of these are actually already in our budget, but some of them are just spelling out what are the things we think are important. How can we work on those over the next year to do better with those?
Well, even that is a budget issue. I mean, it's not a big issue, but someone has to take the lead and figure out how you're going to get more participation. There has to be some outreach or something going on there that someone has to do. I mean, things don't just happen by themselves.
Right. Well, and I think
So-
part of the point is
And
that-
we've been trying to do that for many years. So, it's not something that you can just say, oh, let's do this, and it happens.
I don't.
So everything has some repercussion in the organization, because it's someone's time, effort, knowledge, whatever it is, to make that happen.
But I think something that I'm not sure that it seems like we have always done as well in the past is sort of divvy up those responsibilities. Is who is supposed to do what if somebody has an idea. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate Danielle taking the lead on this and working on some of this. And I think, for example, Jenny, I know, has started to do some research on the all resident voting that's coming up. But I think part of it is that there are 7 of us, right? That's we have time. Most of us also have working 40 hours, and some of us have kids too. So it's not like we don't have any other demands on our time, but there are 7 of us. So if we distribute and say, okay, so Jenny and Danielle, why don't you come up with some ideas for, because Danielle's the youth advisory committee liaison, and Jenny has teenage boys at home. Maybe she has some ideas about how to get them more involved. Okay, come up with some ideas, bring them back to council, and it's not that it has to be. I think part of it is we keep saying these things are important, but then we don't necessarily always move them forward. And so I'm hoping that this framework can help us identify the things that we think are important, and then actually decide, okay, what are the concrete steps that we need to take to do. I mean, I just picked one randomly when I looked over at the paper, but we could do that for each one of these potentially.
Well, I mean, there are things that council, when you talk about budgetary impacts, there are things that in this plan, in a framework, there are things that council needs to take responsibility for, things that we can do. And then there are also things that we need to operationalize through the city manager. And those are the ones that have a budgetary impact, or staff. If it's not financial, it's staff time. So let's keep going.
So I think we have basically 2 documents. We have the framework, which was the summary of the things that we heard were sort of the priorities going into this year. And then the second document outlines some of the tools that would basically be used to track or capture some of the feedback. I think what would be helpful is, in the planning framework, it is a working document, to your point, Mr. Mayor, right? It is not final. It is simply a working document that summarizes that.
Put final.
I don't know who put final on there.
Somebody put this is.
I'll take responsibility for, we had one that said draft document, so we did, when the council adopted the framework, as you did, that became a final document on our end, because we couldn't circulate a document that draft, so that's the only reason it's labeled final.
All right.
Work in progress.
So what I'm wondering is, looking at how we came to this, is there a way to create, to your point, more of a process by how we update and look at this on a regular basis? And how should we do that? So if we know you will start to prepare the information that goes into the budget later into the fall, into the winter.
November, December.
Correct. So leading up to that, there's a lot of information that has to be collected. This is kind of guiding who we need to reach out to within the community, within our advisory boards and committees. are there certain points between now and then that we should indicate certain things that we need to get back and collect in order to inform your process? So we don't have like a process. We need some sort of process that documents what happens to make sure that we're collecting that. So I'll use as another example. I do know that there is a process for our committees and our advisory boards, and they submit a proposal that gets put into the budget. And I know that we had lots of conversation during one of the work sessions on whether or not that should continue to be. How will we do that this year? And that is one of the priorities that is in this document. How do we want to prepare for that going into into fiscal year 2025 to prepare for fiscal year 2026?
So I'll say, this process, the framework, and focusing in on a plan, it just needs to happen every 2 years, along with our elections. And it seemed like in the past we had so much longevity, so much experience that a 2-year term would go by like that, and there was no real document, or there was no framework or a plan. So this two-year overarching look at what we want to accomplish at the beginning of each term, formally reviewing that every year. And then as we talk with the city manager on a quarterly basis, kind of bringing up, so what what we're talking about here is drilling down another level below that.
So, another one of those, thinking about like our work sessions and our upcoming meetings, right? I'll use as an example, we just had reparations committee come and speak to us, and they have funds allocated in our budget. And so we hope that going into the next fiscal year, we'll have some type of report that documents that. We may need to give them some guidance and direction on what our expectations are for the next time they come and present their findings. So how and when should we do that? I'm hoping is kind of a conversation we can kind of document. That's kind of another example of what that could and should look like.
It's very tangible because there are X number of advisory groups, and we need to be responsive so that we are talking to them when a situation comes up. But on the other hand, do we need to formally meet with each one every year, at least? Because there's some that maybe we don't necessarily get to every year. So I'm losing track. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, and I think, one thought is that I think as part of the quarterly update with the city manager, that could be a check-in point for this. And now we do have that meeting already coming up in about a month, so that may be a little bit early in this case. But I think thinking about that as sort of on a quarterly basis, checking in on this and seeing what we need to do in terms of the do next on some of these things. I think in terms of the advisory committees, I think something that I know I struggled with a little bit when I first started on council, I'm not sure I even completely know now, is what is the role of the council liaison to a city advisory committee? I don't think that's written out anywhere. And so I think I had some conversations with some of the more experienced council members when I started, but obviously, I mean, at the bare minimum, it's go to the meetings and answer any questions they have. But it seems like there ought to be more than just that. And that's the sort of thing where whether we're meeting with them or not, I mean, we've certainly had work sessions for things that some of the advisory boards and committees, when they want to bring something to us. I mean, we have one coming up for Board of Elections with a couple of issues. So we have certainly scheduled work sessions related to those things. But I think sort of being a little bit more explicit about what is the purpose of that role beyond being at the meeting and listening to them and answering questions if they have them, what happens after that? I mean, sometimes I think sort of making sure that reports that should get on the agenda and should be then pulled off for discussion, that's one thing, but what beyond that? And that's so I'm not, when we do, I guess, meet with the chairs of the committees once a year,
Once
kind
a
of
year.
collectively.
Right. That was some good points. So, I mean, one of the roles is to actually remind if you're the liaison, and there's a report or some recommendation that comes to council. Sometimes you need to remind council, hey,
You need to put it actually on an agenda for
yeah,
discussion.
you got that report. But I think that that documentation piece is you said, Councilmember McKinney, it's one of the reasons why we got dinged on a lot of things in the JEDI report, because there are practices that are in place, but they are not necessarily written down in a city council member manual.
Right. And there was so much longevity on council for a very long time. And then suddenly in the last few years, you've got a lot of new people coming in and we don't necessarily know what we're doing.
Hey, I didn't mean, Mr. Roberts. Go ahead.
Well, I just got two issues. One is that the real role of a council member as on a board and committee as a liaison is simply to provide information to the board. That's it. Anything they need to know about the city, or what's going on a particular issue or whatever it is, that's your job. It's not your job to guide the board or tell them how to vote, or take a position one way or on something, whatever it is. It's to provide information to the board, to make sure they get the information they need to give us advice. That's your job. It's very simple. It's always been like that. I have another issue, and it was said that in the past there was no work plan, of the city council. And I know that's absolutely not right, because every council that I've ever been on for the last however many years has been, we've always had a work plan in one shape or another. But usually it was based on our budget and what we can afford, and all the debate and discussion that we did during our budget work sessions. That's what was the most important thing. How much money do we have? Which projects can we do? I'm not saying the council always made a good decision on what project do you do. That's another issue. But it always has occurred, and there's always been a plan. So we're not doing anything unique. We might want to change how we do it a little bit, but it still is the basic same thing.
Yeah, and that's true. What council did for many years before I got on and before Ms. Pope got on was, we take the budget, and literally, we have these pieces of paper, the budget, and we would look at the MBOs, the management by objective statements that the staff would circulate through the city manager. And that process, the whole process of management by objectives, MBOs, is something that was popular in the federal government for a long time, but sort of went out of vogue about 15 years ago. Not that it's out of vogue, but so we would literally look at all of the MBOs that staff rose up through the city manager, and we put them on a table with a whole bunch of paper, and we would, I'm not kidding, we pick out was it top 5 or was it top 10? And each of us would pick the top 10, and the ones that we collectively agreed on, we would come up with 5 or 7 that we would actually use in the city manager's evaluation. In fact, that was one piece. And so that worked pretty well. It's pretty clear. It was a way of reaching consensus. I don't know about all the paper on the table. That was sort of a pain in the neck. Ms. Pope?
But no, yeah, so we did do that, but I think what we're doing right now is just making it more clear and follow up, and it's more detailed, it's just more in depth. So I think just so we don't lose any track of anything, and that's important, and it must be written down. And it is also important that if we have new people coming on, that they can research back and say, oh, at least they have something to rely on and read and learn from it. And I think it's just important. It's a very important thing that we're talking about. And yes, we did it, but not to that degree, and not in depth like we're talking right now. So anything to make us more efficient, I think, is a positive outcome.
Right. And of course, with the city manager's role as a manager, these management objectives come forward from staff. They rise up through the city manager, and certainly, the most important part of his job and responsibility is planning and seeing that some of these, the ones that council agrees are essential, are part of that process, and just seeing how he's doing or she is doing.
Just a quick follow-up, because I think Mr. Rodney, Mr. Roberts, you kind of made the point for me, is that you know what it means to be a council liaison because you've been on council a long time, but that's not something that is automatic to somebody coming in new, and that is not, as far as I can tell, written down anywhere or part of any. I mean, you laugh, so this is what we're saying, is that this is the knowledge that needs to be more structurally recorded so that somebody coming in new actually sees a written list of this is what you're supposed to do as a council liaison, because it's not necessarily an obvious thing, because liaison in different settings can mean a very different thing. So I think the point is that it seems obvious to you because you've been doing it for a long time,
Sorry about that.
but it's not necessarily obvious to somebody coming in fresh.
Well,
Yeah.
but that's why it's good to have, some people around that have been around.
Well, and to write
But-
things down.
Well, it probably is written down somewhere. I'm sure somewhere.
Nothing that I've ever seen.
But
The other piece is, we've had transitions with our city manager, and the city manager, sometimes he keeps us on point. Okay, let's face it, he does keep us on point, he or she, to some extent, but, council has to be clear about what the priorities they are hearing from the residents, and that's conversation and the documentation piece, very, very important.
because just as an example, I'm looking at something I know it's near and dear to most of our hearts now, given what's been going on for the past few weeks. But if you look at the Public Safety Advisory Committee page on the city's website, and under it, it just says liaison, and it just says human resources officer. Does not say who the liaison actually is. And then it has the purpose, but I don't know if these are updated, if there are other, priorities that PSAC has identified just recently that we might want to articulate, or if there are things, especially given all of the things that are happening, that they're focusing on even for the next year, because they are very time sensitive. So using that as an example, how do we have, meeting archive, but how should we kind of document that here or someplace else?
Questions, Ms. Pope?
Right, and that discussion came up some years ago because the Public Safety Advisory Committee was trying to have the ability to update, and then the city said no, we don't want that because everything needs to go through the office, and everything needs to be checked and triple checked and make sure everything's correct. So they don't have the ability to do it themselves. So, but who is responsible? So yes. And this is not the only committee. I'm sure there's
100.
everybody else is in the same boat, and things are just not updated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and information too on who is chair, who are the members, and right.
Oh, I was just going to say on the documentation on the archives, I'm looking at it, the minutes are there. Reparations Commission has made the case for a dedicated website for them to store all these materials and reference material, videos, trainings, calendars, all kinds of things. And I think it gets at some of this documentation issue. Some of it does exist. It's just difficult to track it all because from a process perspective, we are lacking some of that institutional knowledge of where things are located, what buckets, and how do we share it, and how do we work on it. The PSAC's a really good example of this. So we got the minutes on the page. PSAC submitted at least 14 recommendations that they wanted the city manager and council to work on, and it's been an ongoing work product. A year ago, they submitted recommendations for a resolution and things to be adopted, and then there are additional policy changes. And so we have that record keeping, but we don't have a dashboard to say, oh, this is a pending task that we need to revisit, and we need to create a work plan for all of those recommendations. Now, internally, I have been meeting with the chair of PSAC to make some inroads on those recommendations. Some we have agreed to change in language. Others we have agreed to explore further. And there's some recommendations that are really hard to do a deeper dive in, just because the work we need to peel back the onion on why the policy, not necessarily why the policy is, but why is it this particular way versus an alternative way.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with a number of other advisory boards. I'm thinking of the Forest Preserve Advisory Board and their guidelines, the maintenance guidelines, and with Green Aces, there are some recommendations that have come up, and it just takes a while for council to get them on the calendar.
And maybe we need to create a workflow or process to designate or have different avenues for different work requests. For example, the movie sponsorship request. We got to the report. It took months before we could get to approving a movie sponsorship. It took up more time than maybe had we all thought about it. Oh, how do we just deal with this one item swiftly and move on?
Well, two thoughts. First of all, regarding the Buddy Attic Master Plan, I can tell you that PRAB had a big discussion about it not last month anymore because it's July 1st, but at their meeting in May.
Really?
And they talked about it. They had some suggestions. They had a lot of feedback to the firm that was doing that. And so I think Greg Varda and the rec staff have been going back and forth, and they plan to have to present that to council in the fall for a work session for further discussion. But so that's the sort of thing that, they're working on it. And it's, they I think had a really great conversation about that. I wasn't at that one because it conflicted with, I think we had it was the night that we had the meeting. It was the week of Memorial Day, I think. So, and the other thought I had was, and I don't know, we've talked about making improvements to the website. And this is something that I haven't sorted through all the sessions that I went to at MML, but one that I did go to was Hyattsville, talking about some of their online community engagement platform, which they have used more for more like public projects, like things like some of their crosswalk painting things or a park project where they have, it's separate from their website, but it's called Go Vocal, and they can set up a place where people can go on there and residents can go on there and provide feedback and also so it sort of tracks the steps in the process, but it seems like a very interactive format. Now, it doesn't replace the website and it doesn't replace in-person engagement, but it seemed like and again, they were using it more for physical type projects that were being done, but it seems like it could also be certainly would work for something like the Buddy Attic Master Plan. So you could say, here's what's happened already, here's where we are, here's what's coming next. And it had like a little timeline thing on it. And I think the one for Hyattsville is called maybe Hi Hyattsville is their website. Hello Hyattsville. Yes. But so that's something worth checking out as something that might be a useful tool. Again, it's separate from their website. There is get to Mr. Roberts' point, there is a separate cost to it. They do pay extra for it every year, but it seemed pretty good.
I was at that work session
Yeah.
as well.
Sophie and I were looking at it like,
And
that's pretty cool.
That was a very cool idea. Yes, and it is separate from their website, and it does have a cost, but it also depends what services you utilize, so you can kind of build it for yourself. But that was a really, really cool idea.
That's kind of like the tools that we tried to use with the ARPA funds.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But this, I think, actually may be a slight, like,
It's more
a
people-
little bit
people.
more-
So it's not staff driven as much as it is.
Well, I think it's staff driven on the back end, but it allows a lot more public feedback. People can make comments and respond to other comments. And I think they envisioned it as we were doing the Engage Greenbelt specifically for ARPA, and it was
Yes.
sort of a during that process, sort of a period of feedback, and now it's a little bit more static. This is a little bit more continual with new projects continuing being added. And I think maybe the framework may be a little bit more user-friendly from what I saw than what we had for Engage Greenbelt, although what we have in Engage Greenbelt isn't bad. I just think this might be a little bit better because that was, after all, a couple years ago, and
It was.
technology develops.
What was the name of that firm? It had a funny name.
I don't even remember.
Shout out or something like that.
I don't even remember because that was what, 3 years ago almost?
Before I know you want to get to public comment, just to add on, I think ultimately, if we can find ways to communicate out progress, action, in addition to it happening in our work sessions and in our regular meetings, I think that could be helpful to the community. And especially for all of our other volunteers and residents that are also in staff that are doing all this work. There's so much happening. It's just how can we much more effectively kind of communicate out to then be able to prioritize and synthesize when we go into budget season.
Makes sense. Let's pause for some public Mr. Orleans?
New Orleans resident. From my perspective, council's first priority should always have been and should always be to listen to the residents more than it generally likes to do, and then to vote on whatever is the question before them, which it generally does not like to do, because voting on a question means that some people are not going to be pleased with the way you're voting, and council would prefer not to be accountable in that fashion. I actually had my hand raised when you recognized that it was up for 18 minutes because I had wanted to comment on the earlier discussion. I would hope there are a few people in this town would be voting for Mr. Hogan in the forthcoming election. I will be voting for his opponent, but she's been our county executive for 6 years now, and she will continue to be our county executive at least until November, if not beyond November. And it's an example of maybe the poor leadership from her at the county level that this whole question of moving fire personnel from station to station in order to meet shortages in one or more stations has come up. And while I understand council made a decision Thursday night to litigate the question, and I'm distressed to hear tonight that the litigation thus far has been unsuccessful, there are practical things council could do with regard to the county executive and county council and the fire chief for that matter, and practical things council could do with all the 27 other municipalities in the county, or 26 other municipalities, and for that matter, unincorporated areas, civic associations or homeowners associations, to balance equitably the distribution of professional personnel around the county. I certainly don't have the answer to this question, but I do have a question that I heard as expressed by some of the people at the firehouse 2 weeks ago at that meeting that some of council attended in lieu of the council meeting that was scheduled for that night. I heard several members of various volunteer associations complain about the inability of them to collect ambulance fees. And the notion that that Greenbelt Council or any other municipal council or county council for that matter, or county executive, that any public official in our county would want to rationalize the distribution of professional personnel in order to protect or advance the ambulance fees that could be collected by the various associations seems to be absurd. But this all ought to be part of a much larger public discussion than was had tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So this question, that's not what we're talking about now, but on Monday, it's going to be an agenda item. Yeah, Mr. Hartman.
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. I did want to respond to several things. So, first of all, on the Greenbelt, the framework, which is really fantastic. Thank you to Councilmember McKinney. And on the, I do have some comments about FY25 objectives. Like the first one, expand the activities, access, opportunities, quality education, recreation, youth development, etc. One of the objectives in that first one was to look at the business community. And one of the things that I suggest that the council do is reconnect with the Greenbelt Business Alliance. And I know that's been kind of dormant itself, and would hope that it could be a more robust connection with that. Also, the 3 shopping centers in Greenbelt, Betway Plaza, Greenway Center, and Roosevelt Center. I thought it would be good if the council met with the merchants of those organizations, of those 3 centers, because I know when you meet with like Beltway Plaza, you meet with like Cap'n and or Roosevelt Center, you would meet with Mr. Kostakos maybe, but meeting with the merchants of those 3 centers might be a good idea. As far as improving and enhancing public safety, I love the idea of the police academy, Citizens Police Academy. I went through it myself. It's a wonderful program. I suggested after I took it several years ago that they create a high school or middle school program and have that developed by students in conjunction with the students so that it's more student oriented by the students. Let's see. Just other comments. Let's see. That's pretty much that. But talking about the website, I know you're going to be revamping it, but I suggest having a special section for visiting Greenbelt. What to do in Greenbelt? I've seen a lot of the cities, a lot of there's a lot of websites that say the greatest cities in the Chesapeake Bay or wonderful small towns or things of that nature. And I think that if we had a section in our website about visiting Greenbelt, things that are around here like the Patuxent Research, Goddard, and other places, plus the entertainment, plus the other things like the museum and things of that nature to kind of like push Greenbelt as a destination and the closeness to Metro, et cetera. I think that also as far as the Mayor Pro Tem brought up about advisory committees and stuff, and it seems to me that being a former member of Green Aces, I think the biggest contribution that the council liaison can provide to the advisory committees are acting as a reality check. I know that a lot of times the advisory committees want to do something or want to ask for something, and I think that the liaison with the council liaison as well as the staff liaison as well provide reality checks to the committees, say what's possible, why things are a good idea, or things to look out for, or things of that nature. Also, by the way, also with the advisory committees, they do not all the advisory committees or boards have their minutes posted. But I think one of the biggest challenges, if they are going to put minutes, is to allow the committees to put their draft minutes that will be approved at the next meeting. And that way people can read it and go to that meeting and comment on the draft minutes before they're approved and no longer able to be changed. I think all of the committees are very reticent about providing draft minutes because they're not approved. But if you make it clear that they are drafts, then people have a chance to look at them and maybe comment on them. The last comment was just as I'm not sure who writes the descriptions of the work sessions, but on August 7th, the work session is listed as all citizen voting initiative, and I think it should read all residents instead of all citizens. Also, if you want to look at the last thing I'll say is that we've had many Chautauquas and all kinds of visioning and stuff like that, and I know there are records of them and minutes or reports of them, and I think it really be helpful to see how many times the same things are listed. And I think that in order not to, just go over the same thing and not do anything, but also after having a Chautauqua or revisioning, actually doing something about it. It's the same idea as when the council accepts a report. Got it. When the council accepts a report but doesn't adopt it, or it sits on the shelf, and I think it's important that when you receive reports from advisory committees or boards, that something actually be done about it. And I apologize for taking
Appreciate it.
time, but
Yeah.
they built up.
So with the posting of minutes, that's a little bit of a sticking point. Because on the one hand, sometimes it takes a little while for the advisory board to actually prepare the minutes and to agree amongst themselves whether or not they're ready. And then they're not really until they're accepted by council. It's probably a best practice to not post them early on. So it's a little bit of a sticking point. With the website, it's just we really need a new website. There is some information if you go under if you go to the home page and go over to I want to, and then I think there's points of interest. Actually, it's under business.
That's too
So-
many clicks.
It's too many clicks. It's too many layers. Too many layers down. Everything should be 3 layers down or less, ideally. So we definitely, it's high priority. We gotta fix this website. We gotta get a new one.
We've had a meeting with Granicus as part of a renewal. We've had demos with several other providers, Civic Plus, who's also our recodification service provider now. So we're exploring options. I learned last week that we are on a vision platform with Granicus that's outdated. There's a new platform.
Right now, I'm like, okay.
There's a new platform that Granicus offers that's more dynamic, user friendly, and so they've offered to upgrade us to the new platform. So we're negotiating a renewal in a way that allow us to keep what we have until we find something better, or we decide to stay with Granicus. So we've had those conversations.
We actually won this website at an MML conference. One of the council members dropped their card. Yeah, so we got this for free.
Yeah, but this is many years ago, but it was free. They did it free. Yes, we won this.
Want to mention
Yes.
whose business card?
No, we do not
I
want
think,
to.
I think I know.
But I think I do too. But to the minutes, if I may, it always, sometimes these committees have a problem and not have a quorum. So there, that delays things even further. So, but I understand you people want to see the drafts and, but we also have to keep in mind these are minutes, there's not much change, you can't change things around. But I understand your concern, but that is a big issue that some committees just have a problem with attendance, and that delays things even further.
One comment on the website: it might have been free at the beginning, but it's expensive. It costs us $39,000.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, annual. That's the
Annual,
fee.
yes, but
Right.
there's more to it than a website. It's agenda management, it's the streaming service, it's our Gov delivery platform. We also have text messaging system that's not used, so it has a lot built into it. There's an iLegislate app that you can install on your tablets and phones, and you can track all your council
Actually use
business
that
on
sometimes. I
Okay,
do use
so
that.
so there's a lot of features in there. Just we're not using them. We didn't get trained on them. So it might have been free at the beginning, but it's
The creation of the website may have been free, but the development, the continue,
So for the council members at that last MML conference, I hope you dropped your business cards and. Councilmember McKinney.
I think I want to thank Mr. Hartman. I think he basically articulated what I think the purpose and the intent of the work plan is, right? We summarize things that we have heard, and then our hope is that we get feedback from the community about some of the priority areas before we get into budget, right? We should not be having the conversations about priorities and where funding is going at the first time during a budget work session. It should be driving what goes into that budget. So if we're thinking about process for the next time around, do we take this work plan and we, have a session like this where we're getting feedback? Hopefully we can actually get more of our community members to share and give feedback on this work plan, and then say, okay, here's where we're landing. I think your point, for example, about the shopping centers, for example, right? That was a priority that we've heard that should be driving when we have a work session with Beltway Plaza, when we have a work session about what's going on in Roosevelt Center, because it's been identified as a priority. So that then feeds into the upcoming work sessions that we have scheduled over the next couple of months.
Ms. Pope?
Yeah, and that's where this Hello Hyattsville, this
Yes.
nifty tool they have right here would come in, because people can actually take surveys on here. So, and they have several projects going on,
14.
and they'd like to have the feedback from the community, which is an excellent tool. Which that is something we can connect with.
So the other challenge that we had for a few years, we couldn't, frankly, we could not get all of council in one room to sit down together and kind of talk through this. And with the council that we have now, I think it's a little bit easier to all sit down and share ideas in a constructive way. But for a couple of terms there, frankly, we just really weren't able to do that. Did have back in 2022, 2023, firm helped come in and work with the council. We had a retreat, and they did sort of an outline, but council members supply them. I went through my extensive archives because I'm trying to reorganize my personal data. I have a copy of that. I wonder if most of council has actually seen that. It is available on the website someplace. I could share it if you want. See if I can. Yeah.
Although I think that the process we did supported by MML, I think worked as well as the one we, that we had in 2021. And part of it may have been because we did actually get all the council members in for a longer period of time. But I thought that was an excellent service that we were at the front of it. Now that it's something that MML is offering to other municipalities who want facilitation, they're rolling it out. And I think it was because we were asking about it, and we were the first ones to be able to utilize that. But I think they've realized that's something that's useful for other municipalities.
Definitely. Let me see if I can share my screen. So these broad outcome areas were, they actually grew out of the last visioning session that we had that was maybe 8 or 9 years ago. So enhancing our sense of community, ensuring economic development and sustainability, improving transit opportunities, maintaining Greenbelt as an environmentally proactive community, improving and enhancing public safety. Those were the buckets that we came up with. So from there, we brainstormed and we came up with what does success look like in these areas. So, for example, under enhancing our sense of community, there's shared vision, buy-in, the community vision, that emphasis on and having things kind of grow up from our residents. There was a real concern about morale back in 2020, 2021. Understanding the boundaries. I don't know. So often, I got an email just today from a resident who lives over in the gates of Cipriano asking for assistance. So,
I had that before too. Yes.
and we had a lot of conversations about gateway signage because it's not really clear for some of our residents where Greenbelt starts and where it stops. And over on Hanover, we've got the one apartment community that's not in Greenbelt at all. So I need to actually circulate this to everybody because it's not fair to just kind of spring it out like this. But that was the process. We had the outcome areas from previous planning attempts and from the community visioning, but we talked about what success would look like, and from there, instead of drilling down to specific objectives, which is what you've tried to do, Councilmember, which is important to do because that's how we get the accountability from the city manager. But this is outcome area, what success looks like, proposed success statement, which was sort of a way of articulating what we talked about without really drilling it down to the specific objectives. So the
Economic
second,
development, I think that's where the
so coming out of that session, the top priorities were promote staff morale and support because we were in the middle of COVID at that time. Focus on equity and inclusion, which sort of led us to the hiring the DEI contractor. Increasing the tree canopy by the forest preserve maintenance plan, which is something that the advisory boards have been pushing us to do, and it was just hard to actually get to that maintenance plan. Other priorities, increasing funding for public safety, stormwater issues, reducing the carbon footprint, Greenbelt West, new city park, playing fields, protecting bark, addressing health disparities, holding the tax rate down, short-term and long-term strategies, economic development. So that's what we talked about in 2022, 2023, or 2021 is, I guess. Yeah, yeah. So it kind of shows you kind of how we ended up with the discussion this year. Really, it's like the next step in that, but we can be a lot more specific going
Or
forward.
at least how do we document it, right? So a lot of these things that have been done in previous councils and things like that, or that are going on now. So the example that you used before about the economic development manager, right?
Yes.
That was a priority.
Came out of that.
What we did was we hired an economic development, and here are all the things
Right.
that the economic development manager did. So if there is a way to be able to better document that based on those priorities, so it doesn't just go on a shelf or in a SharePoint, I think that will help us not only to have staff be accountable, but for us to be accountable in what we're saying we heard as priorities from the city.
Right.
Got to tell you, City Manager Summerone does not have shelves in his office, but he does have a massive SharePoint digital file. Hey, Amy, what are you thinking, Jenny and Rodney?
But you can see we did
Yes.
work, right? I mean, it's not like the other previous council members and us didn't work. We did work. It's just, I think it just progressed. It's progressing. We're progressing with the times and with new ideas from new members and assistants, of course, because, you're doing this so.
'Cause-
That's very helpful to us.
Because I think at the end of the day, we have community members that don't have a lot of time, right?
Right.
And so we have to figure out how to communicate progress and impact quickly and succinctly so that they know what's going on. And to ultimately, if they're seeing that, they're like, oh, okay, I can get involved this way. That's how we gain engagement. So they may not be able to listen to a 3-hour council meeting, right? Or work. So how do we do that better?
Right.
Yeah, and also that kind of addresses, constantly, we're getting questions like, oh, well, why didn't council see this coming? But we do. It's just the communication piece, which comes from documentation and finding creative ways that communication channels that work for people. It's not any one communication method. We have to have all of these different ways of reaching people where they are. Jenny.
I was just going to say something similar, that I think this is really important for the public to see, because this really does come from them. Comes from our conversations with them, and looking through this again, I can see conversations I've had, and as you said, sometimes people are like, well, why aren't the city council doing anything about that? But we are, but it's just not always clear, and this sort of showing them that we actually have objectives, that we're working towards goals, that we're not just sort of showing up and approving expenses, that we have goals that we're working towards for our city long term. I think it's just really important that people see that.
Yeah, we're not just shooting from the hip.
No, like we're thinking about the future of our police force. We're thinking about better ways to engage youth. Like we're working on all of those things. So
One of the tools is, can you take this work plan and almost do like you do a quarterly manager report? So do we take the work plan, and then at the end of Q1, we're kind of documenting not only what staff are doing, but what also some of the communication and conversations that council members have. It becomes one place, and then every quarter we can kind of communicate on those things. It may not be, everything, but at least it is communicating some of the things that we said we were going to prioritize, and maybe even some of the new things we heard from some of these conversations and engagements that we've had. So maybe it's just a collective quarterly report.
And it has to be tempered, because we've got this. Our goals they're not just aspirational; they're more than aspirational. But to operationalize everything, if we're able to document progress on maybe 20% of a plan, or the things that we think are going to move forward. Because sometimes things happen, so something changes. So as far as moving forward with an idea or a priority, sometimes there's a roadblock or whatever. So we can't hold Mr. Summerone and staff accountable for things. Take the reaching out to middle school students, or creating a middle school academy for middle school students. That's something that has to come through Chief Bowers and his staff, along with getting the schools to kind of buy in.
Yes, Cook County, yeah.
So it's something that's aspirational. It's something we can see that would be a good idea. We can see that would be impactful.
There might be small things that he might be doing. It may not get to the ultimate goal, but maybe there was one step that he took to move that forward, and we should be able to communicate that. It may be as simple as he has the meeting with the school system to discuss the idea.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's progress. That's an interim objective that's met.
And they are focusing on the middle school. There was a basketball game or something over there, and they've been talking with Dr. Jackson, who is the community school outreach staff person there at the middle school. So,
Well, and I think that, they did the one for elementary school. They
Yes.
did the program. Was that a summer camp or is that spring break? Was that last summer?
No, that was summer.
That was
camp.
last summer
Yeah.
already. It's and I think the Explorer
just did
program
one.
that's
They just
listed
did
there.
one
Did they just do another
They
one?
just had one.
Okay, I remember the one from last year, and
mhm,
I
and they did
yeah.
one this year, 1 week. Yes.
But so I think those are the sorts of things, and I think that's not the full Explorer program, because I think my
No, no.
understanding is that the Explorer program that existed previously
that's different.
was different.
Yes.
But I think some of these things are I think this is a challenge that we have, is the city of Greenbelt does a great number of things. And it's not, we don't necessarily always communicate clearly to everybody who's interested all of the great things we're doing, and then get the ideas for other things. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we get a lot of the information out that we're really doing.
Mhm.
And I think that's and people just don't know. I mean, how did and that's an important tool. I think we were talking about other things. I said I can't remember what it exactly was, but I said we don't toot our horn enough. We don't share enough all the things that we are doing. So of course then you always get feedback. Well, what are you doing, right? So.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I remembered a thought that I had earlier. I think one of the things that we have talked, and I know I've mentioned it to Josue, is we get the city manager, the weekly report, but some of it is very, very, detail things like had this meeting, that sort of thing. And I think that's another way. So I think in terms of just thinking back to our objectives for this meeting, right? One was to determine how the planning framework can and should be used in the future and how often it should be reviewed, as well as discuss possible tools that can be used to support the planning framework and how they can be implemented. I think something, and I don't remember, the weekly report that goes through and having a little bit more objective based things there, so that, because we read that and we can say, oh, in terms of the Explorer program, Chief Bowers met with such and such a person about this, and having those weekly reports be a little bit more focused on actions that moved some of these priorities forward, rather than some of the not that it isn't kind of interesting to see some of the website stats that are in there. I actually kind of enjoy that stuff, but I think that's something that maybe, Josue, we could think about how that could be a more useful document, not just for council members, but then to pull things out of that can be shared with the public in not a multi-page document that I don't know how many people besides council actually read. and a few people, I think a few people do, but
Well, I think it's more people than we might know, and also people tend to focus in on issues that affect them in a very direct way. So, right now we're having this meeting, and a lot of our residents are really focused on the volunteer firefighters and the career firefighters and thinking about that. But thank you for kind of steering us back to the meeting objectives. So we've talked about the framework, the purpose of the planning framework, and we've talked a little bit about the timing, how it should be. We've sort of temporarily in terms of time, sort of talked about the checkpoints, planning at the very beginning of a term, formally reviewing at least once a year, quarterly updates, and then council sort of laying out with the advisory boards and other stakeholders through the calendar and updating our stakeholder meeting list, which that list sort of grew over time. And, we were supposed to talk about it every 2 weeks, and we haven't done that in a comprehensive way. So we really do need to sit and collectively, now that we are all a little bit more comfortable with what we're doing, collectively take a real close look, because there are some groups maybe that we should meet with more often than there are other groups. Sometimes we try and there's a meeting on paper, a stakeholder meeting. We should meet with this group. Then when staff tries to arrange the meeting, there's not a critical mass of individuals, so it doesn't quite happen the way that we would like for it to happen.
Well,
So
maybe
it's-
we just have to go through the stakeholder list and then, prioritize again and just
Yeah.
sort it out a little bit.
on a regular basis.
Yes.
But with this council, though, we need to think of separate from what has happened in the past. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
I think it's also worth thinking about our work sessions held in the municipal building the most effective way to meet with those groups, because I'm thinking about Mr. Hartman's suggestion about meeting with the merchants, that asking them, part of the problem of them not getting a critical mass may be that they're not going to come to a work session in the municipal building, but we could hold something there. We have some more of the technology even to make that virtual, but even if it's just a public meeting but held at Greenway Center, that the merchants could come there and stop in and we can hear from them then. I think that's true not just for that example, but other things. But I think always expecting people to come to us is clearly not effective in all cases. Because although we love to see Mr. Hartman's face, we see a lot of the same people coming to council meetings, and so we're not hearing from everybody else. And so I think that's another aspect of that stakeholder list, is think about, okay, these are the people we need to talk to. What is the best way to do that? And maybe it's not having them come to a work session here. Maybe it's going to them. I don't know if they have merchant meetings that we could then attend, or some other way to think about doing that. Or I don't know if
I know that Beltway Plaza has a merchant meeting,
They do.
right? At,
Well,
at
they-
Three Brothers, it was on a once a month or something.
So, you know,
I don't know if
I
that's
think
actively
this is a great idea. So another way, and I know Mr. Summerall has a point.
Yeah.
Pop-up
Pop-up council
Pop-up
meeting.
council
Look,
meetings, Jim.
we do a
So-
pop-up at Greenway Center.
Sometimes, you know, a staff meeting, instead of having council involved, sometimes the staff gathering is just as effective or more effective. Take, for example, a few days ago, I think there was staff had arranged a roundtable meeting with some of the hotels. So I think, was it 4 or 5 of the 6 hotels? Greenbelt has 6 hotels. You know, there aren't too many other municipalities except for College Park that actually have that many hotels. So, you know, staff and a representative from the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation were in attendance, and there was a good conversation. I popped in and said hello and popped back out again because there were other things going on. But I mean, that's a good example. And the Business Alliance sort of grew out of the business coffees that we were having on a regular basis. And most of those were here in council chambers, and we had come and speak. And so it's just a question of, you know, just meeting people where they are. And so with economic development and the business community, if you want to get together a group of business people, especially if they're senior managers, you don't have a 2-hour workshop. You have maybe coffee or something in the early morning before they have to pop in. And you just have to really pay attention to who the audience is. With the homeowners associations around the city, you know, we can take the meetings over to their meetings. It's something we used to do. We could do that again. We used to, every time we'd meet with Spring Hill Lake with Franklin Park, or Experian Village, as it was called there for a minute. We would go there, and we held work sessions there in the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center. The acoustics were terrible, but we did that. We met in the leasing center a couple of times.
That was good.
Yeah.
That worked out actually really well. We should do that.
We should be taking.
We should do that again.
Technology is a little bit better now, so we can do that more effectively. So, this one point on the meeting objectives, how the framework can complement the standing rules. I'm not so sure about that one. I mean, they need to. It seems. How do you picture that happening? Just in terms of do the standing rules need to be changed more often?
No, I mean, I think that opens the door to a lot of stuff. I mean, I think it's part of the process, right? We look at the standing rules. We looked at them with the new council. The planning framework is a working document, and it looks at some of our priorities. I think a lot of our things should get reviewed on a regular basis. The standing rules call out some of these tools in engagement things, but it doesn't call out some of these more tactical things that we've been talking about. And so whether or not that means an update to the standing rule is needed, or simply more of an operational document that supports the standing rules are the standing rules. This is how we operate as a council, right? But then there are things like we've been talking about that guide more of our day-to-day. How do you actually execute on some of those things that are in the standing rules? So that's where the complement comes in. So I don't think it's a yes or no answer, Mr. Mayor. I think there could be a review, and there should be regularly, of those standing rules. But I do think that there are more tactical things that we've been talking about that track our progress and actions that we are taking that basically support the work that council does, which is articulated in the existing standing rules.
So, just talking about tools that are at our disposal, we've got a lot of different tools, but you know, the standing rules, the city charter, the budget, and the MBOs that are embedded in the budget, and council's framework. Those are like the primary, and perhaps I've left something out, but those are like the primary tools. that we have at our disposal in working with the city manager, working with staff, and working the public. Another thing would be the community-wide visioning, because that should be something that guides us as well. So I think those are the pillars, as Mr. Samarone in his budget talked about community pillars. What were those pillars in the budget, Mr. Samarone?
It's a test.
That was
1,000 years ago.
But I think the pillars are the things we need to just be able to articulate that these are the things that we are using to guide how we operate effectively and productively. And we, to Ms. Pope's, like, we have these things, we are doing those things. We just need to show how they interconnect and how they guide the work that we're trying to do.
Oh, Joe, you really want me to? For sure.
Well, while Josue's looking for them. Okay,
So there are 6 pillars that guide the administration work is exceptional service. This builds on a long-standing tradition that we go out our way to deliver top-notch services to our residents, including picking up solid waste from their closets at home. Not for everyone, but parts of our community. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has been a long-standing goal of our community. It's part of the community pledge that we celebrate all. Collaboration and partnership. That's what the Greenbelt's founded on, this concept of cooperation and being cooperators. So let's build it into our pillars. Preparedness and resiliency. Becoming proactive, preparing for worst case scenarios, and building a stronger sense of community and engagement. I think the fire and EMS services highlights are being prepared, being able to call on surrounding communities, being able to come together for a common goal. I think how swiftly we organize around this activity demonstrates our strong sense of community and engagement. Sustainability, promoting green living and preserving our environment, and smart economic development and innovation. Part of what drives this is that we're landlocked. We don't have a lot of green space and much space for development, so we got to be smart about our growth, primarily focusing on redevelopment and looking at ways to stay competitive.
Those are good. Hey, speaking of economic development, hey, have you got any word on the Royal Farm? It looks like they are about to open. Do you know when? Have you gotten any word?
I got a
about-
date that it's in August. I've been emailing with Terry to get a contact on the business side of the Royal Farms. I imagine the council may want to do a ribbon cutting ceremony, so we're looking to set that up. We have a ribbon cutting ceremony coming up in 9 days for Lafayette Credit Union. We've
It's fantastic over
Right.
at Greenway Center.
Greenway Center, correct?
I heard the manager
10th.
of Royal Farms might be, they're transferring the person up on 197 up in Laurel down here, so they already have a person who's going to be the
Excellent.
manager, and they're just hiring, I think.
I mean, they have the sign up that says that they're
Opening soon,
hiring.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and also hiring. There's
Coming
it says coming soon
soon.
and now hiring are on the signs.
So
Yeah,
it
that's
looks
good.
like they're ready to open.
They
basically.
look fairly close.
Very quickly. It's
Do you know, so we had, protecting the historic area there, and it's fenced off, and there was supposed to be some signage
There's
there.
a sign up.
There's a sign
I,
up.
I could see it from the road when I drove by yesterday or this morning. I didn't go over to see the sign, but I could see there was a sign.
So the message was loud and clear to the construction crew and the developer that they needed to submit a restoration plan, which they did before they did any work. They cleared up the site, laid down some straw. So the work that happened on the Toppling Castle site would have been approved.
Way that when they came and spoke with us a few years back, that was supposed to be an amenity, a place where people could kind of walk over and look and reflect historic site. So there's a sign up, and I don't know if it looked like there's a bench or something over there. It was supposed to be a nice place where people would actually pause and look and think about Greenbelt as they were having a chicken sandwich.
Yeah, I was actually just going
Vehicle.
or charging the vehicle, hopefully, yeah. So I just wanted to add to the idea of how the framework can complement the standing rules. At least one of the ways I was thinking about that was, the standing rules are sort of the way things are structured in terms of, how the meetings are run and that sort of thing. But I think part of what we don't have gets back to the documentation about what are the responsibilities and expectations of a council member, which are the standing rules are more about meetings and very formalized, but things like I wrote down some of the things that Mr. Roberts was saying about being a council liaison. I think thinking about, if you go to the very last page and the one that has the improve enhanced council communication, cooperation, efficiency, and workflows with city staff, enhance council's ability to advocate for Greenbelt residents at the state and federal level. But I guess part of what I see, some of the things that we have started doing is a process for documenting council activities that not that they were being read out before, but now we have a slightly different process for that. So documenting that a little bit better, or some of the other things that the protocols and processes and expectations that are not really don't quite rise to the level of being a rule, but sort of a these are the expectants, these are the procedures. So again, that it's clear that we're all on the same page in terms of what's expected. About if you go to one of the outside advisory board meetings and you hear something interesting, make sure you report that back. Or passing along grant opportunities that we hear about, that passing those on to staff. It's those sorts of things that I think seem to be a complement to the standing rules in support of this framework. And I guess that's the way I would look at that objective is how do we make it clear what we should be doing and how we should be doing it, and that's how I would see that. Because like, for example, we have the review the stakeholder meeting list and create efficiencies. I think that's what we were talking about just earlier.
So you maybe like creating a section or a page and adding that to the rules, which is describing council roles a little bit more clearly.
And I don't know that it needs to be. I don't know that it needs to be as formal as the standing rules are written, although it could be.
Well, you don't want to
But it needs to be documented.
You don't want to micromanage it either, because you're going to have a list like forever. It's just you have to find like certain, like you said, reporting back, and it doesn't have to state, well, I'm reporting back grant information. It can say reporting back pertinent or important information, but that we share it, and send it out to everybody.
It's like a city council job description, so that somebody who's somebody who's thinking about running knows, okay, this is what is expected me of being on city council. Like that, yeah. I mean, it's not exactly that,
right,
but that's what. Yeah.
But a lot of the things like we do that. Some of the things we already do, right?
Right.
Sharon.
It's not that it's necessarily anything we're not doing. I think it's just taking to heart the notion that we heard from the Jedi group of through the audit that you can't review documentation that doesn't exist. If it's in somebody's head and nowhere else, you can't review that.
Yeah, but I think to put everything down
You
in
can't
here,
put
you
everything
can't do
down.
that
Not
either.
everything.
So you have to set a limit, and you have to set guidelines. What should go in there? What's important enough to go in there? Because otherwise, you're going to put something in, and somebody's, well, you didn't put that in there. Why didn't you put in? So you run into that. So how do we manage that, and how do we decide?
The
what
rules
goes
are
in?
the rules, and then there are processes.
Right.
And process is just how we work together to create efficiency.
Right, and-
the rules are governing documents.
And how we efficiently work together, I think that is something we need to sit down and decide. And so this is what this should be our guidelines for us.
Right.
That's kind of what we're doing right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And that's
it'd be
important.
interesting to see how other cities, some of our neighbors, do this. I think we'd actually be taking the lead in some ways. Hey, so council activities, how can we put that someplace where the public can kind of see? Or I think it's in our it's a shared document that we use to talk about things. But is that something that we should be sharing?
Well, I think that list of activities then goes into the minutes for the meeting when we report them. So I think so we put it up on the screen to share during the meeting on the screen, but then that list goes into the minutes.
Right. Okay.
And so he just pointed out that, yeah, I think we forgot. So on that we have a bullet point there that says participate in PGCMA, COG, and NLC meetings, but we didn't put anything about MML in there. So we should have.
Also, just to clarify, NLC subcommittees.
Yeah.
because we're
Well, and I
also
think-
members of subcommittees.
And I think
right?
that was intended to be included as part of like the sub things under NLC.
Okay.
We could be more explicit if you want to, but I think we
I just-
definitely left out MML.
I just made a comment because I know how
Yeah.
you wanted just so I thought, well, maybe she left that out.
No, it was not intentional. I
That's what-
think.
and that's what
think.
I thought. I thought this was just by oversight. But anyways, this is a draft document. This is a working document, right?
Right, well, and I think that's why it's good to get feedback, and some of the things that Michael had to say too. I think
Right, right.
are
Valid,
good things
yeah.
to look at adding. But
Yeah. The economic development group, for instance, And I think and just to the economic development director that we had did meet with all of the businesses
Yeah,
in
he
the
was
city.
definitely doing a good
remember?
job of getting out
And
and
that-
talking with the smaller businesses.
And that actually took a long time when very first economic development person came on board
Right.
to get that list, because we wanted a list of all the businesses in the city,
Right.
because we had no idea what businesses are in our city, and we should know that. We should have a directory or something.
And
So,
we
yeah.
got a grant to do that.
Mhm.
We're actually working on that.
Yeah, so they did go, so, but we have to
So-
continue to do that.
So I greatly appreciate the work that's gone into pulling this together, the goals and the objectives. And if we had more time, or if I had more time, or if I was a better person, I would have tried to sort of integrate some of those goals from the last work plan into this somehow. Or just the buckets and whatnot are pretty good. Just kind of keeping that framework, or when we do our community visioning, trying to kind of come up with something to communicate, in broad 8 or 9 broad priorities, kind of like the pillars that we've got, which are actually pretty good, Mr. Samuel. How'd you come up with those pillars?
Teamwork. We pulled the managers and asked them to voted on what resonated well with their departments and their approach to work, and that's how we came up with 6.
That's great. So we need to do the same thing with council and with the public, and kind of
Ask AI.
group them all together.
Maybe it gives us a hint.
You've got a great starting place. You got 6 pillars already.
So I don't know how do we wrap this up, or how do we move forward? So I think the discussion that we're having is very, very fruitful, both for us, but also, for the public that is looking and watching and, tuned in specifically to hear this.
There's a few people. Nobody has their hands raised.
It's got their hands up. We got another question.
And then we can wrap it up.
Mr. Orleans?
Yes, Bill Orleans, resident. The thing I've objected to with almost every legislature that I've had any interaction with, and it's not that many, but to a small extent, New York State General Assembly, New York City Council, now that I'm back down here, Greenville City Council, Maryland General Assembly, County Council, a little bit the District Council. The thing I've objected to most over the years is that most members of these legislators, and also most executives that I've had anything to do with, think that it's all about you. It's not about you. It's about the people of Greenbelt or those other jurisdictions. I don't think I have any philosophical disagreement with the idea that maybe sometimes Greenbelt should go there to meet with either residents or commercial entities, wherever that there is. But the notion that Greenbelt, especially with regard to the commercial entities, are going to deemed it appropriate not to invite them in here for a stakeholder work session, but to go there, wherever there is, where in fact it might be virtual and that the residents of the city could observe what's being said and maybe participate during the course of the stakeholders work session. Just, strikes me as wrong-headed if we're interested in the residents of Greenbelt, along with their council, formulating public policy in the interest of the residents of the city of Greenbelt. Work sessions, for the most part, should be here. If they are going to be there, again, wherever there is, certainly technology should permit residents who are not otherwise there, along with council and city staff, technology should be provided so that Greenbelt residents could observe and participate. It's not about Greenbelt Council. Your instruments, although you may not accept it, you're instruments of the people of Greenbelt. As I've said to all of you, you don't own Greenbelt Council. Greenbelt residents own Greenbelt Council. If you ever begin to think that you own it, and I think 6.5 of you do, still, then you're ill-serving the residents of the Greenbelt, and ultimately you're ill-serving yourself.
I have a suggestion on a tool that we can expand. It's come up, and I think you're already doing it as a process, and that's the stakeholder engagement. It hasn't been explicit that there's an assessment that goes into the stakeholder engagement, but there is. When we talk about meeting with the HOA, we assess what are their priorities. Property insurance has been one of them. Utilities and not. So there's a form of an assessment that goes through the stakeholder engagement. We're just not calling it that. When we meet with we met with the school district. We identify some of the priorities and trajectory and how council could play a role. So I think as we build out this stakeholder engagement, we can do identify that assessment piece, why we meet with this group, and it's some of the questions that Ms. McKinney's already asked. What's the point? So, but calling it out as the assessment is key to guiding that work.
Well said. Neil?
So as far as next steps, I think it's trying to identify some of the things that we might already be doing to try to formalize them, right? So we have now, I think, we have our work session and our meeting schedule. And we have, the stakeholders that we're trying to meet during that time. I think one of the things that would be helpful, and I think it's in the document that we have, is just having a clear objective on what we are trying to do when we're meeting with that stakeholder, and that should be guiding when that meeting is set up. I think that's a pretty easy thing to just kind of implement because we're already halfway there. I think we've talked about today looking at this work plan this framework and being able to sort of marry that with your quarterly city managers meeting so that we can document on a quarterly basis things that council is doing, things that staff is doing, and it not necessarily just being a running list of all the tasks. It is lining up to some of the things in that framework. So we just have to figure out how we kind of communicate that. We've also talked about our council activities document and maybe trying to we put it in the minutes, right? But there may be a way to also call out how some of those activities are also aligned to some of the things in the framework. And then, Mayor, we've talked about sort of this community visioning and thinking about how we want to take this framework and use it just as, Mr. Hartman did today, getting more feedback on it so that we're prepared going into the winter time and looking at the budget. So maybe there's an opportunity to collect more information. It would be great to have Hello Hyatt's fill that site up, but there are budget implications to that, right?
Yes.
So how are there things that we can do to collect some more of that information so that it guides that budget planning process? those are some of the main takeaways that I've heard from the discussion today.
It's very good. Short term, this discussion, council, focusing on the stake. I guess you just said this, the stakeholder list and the calendar, just actively reviewing that. Maybe that should be one of the first things that we do in August. I mean, we're coming back with the city's meeting towards the end of August, or towards the beginning of the end of July. I think we may actually have a couple of openings, or maybe this discussion doesn't need to take a whole work session at all, or maybe it doesn't need to take a work session at all. Or,
The one other thing that I think we talked about is also looking at committees and advisory boards, because we had a discussion in a work session, a budget work session about it, and how we are, one, communicating what our role is, whether it be kind of just sharing that information out to them, but also understanding the priorities of those committees and how they're feeding that back. I don't know how we update, but then also how we're giving them some guidance going into the budget. So you had mentioned one of the committees. How do we share out that information that you had mentioned as an example from PSAC? I think there's a better way that we can do that from our advisory boards and committees that we might.
Right. And if I may add, I think that there's some consolidation of expectation that need to happen with the boards boards and commissions. I see them as an extension of council to be able to have dedicated bodies with focused expertise, vet projects and ideas that then come back to council. It's in bit in contradiction with what Mr. Roberts had said about being liaison to those boards and commission, that you're there to listen and provide information. Those are two different positions, or is council's role to listen to the feedback of those boards and commission, or to use them as a way to build capacity to do more work that can't all be done at the council meeting.
I think the meeting with the advisory board chairs is coming up. And I got to tell you, chairing those committees, it's a little awkward because on the one hand, you want to give everyone an opportunity to speak and to report out on what's going on in their advisory committee. So I'm torn between just trying to facilitate a conversation and draw people out, as opposed to kind of driving the work session with a agenda that council has come up with. So there's a little bit of a pull, I think, between listening and drawing people out and going in with a really, really clear agenda about exactly, well, this is going to happen. So there's a pull between the two of them to some extent. So in this discussion about advisory committee roles and liaison, we can talk about that a little bit more. And I believe that is coming up pretty soon. Is that right? So if I could get some more input from council on how that meeting should go.
I mean, it may simply be asking them what their objectives are before we get into that meeting. And so we know, here are the 3 things I want to cover, 5 things, whatever it may be. That kind of guides the discussion. I think just having those clear objectives can be helpful. I think also asking them how we can better support their work could also be a discussion point that we have on that agenda as well.
And we do ask them that.
We usually ask them, but we can ask them in advance.
Definitely ask them in advance, and I think if, for example, we got that information from them in advance and then had a slide for each, because there's a lot of the same things that we usually want to know from the advisory committee chairs. Yes. I think sometimes it's going through how many vacancies they have, some of those things. If we give them a heads up of what we're looking for, maybe what are your top 3 priorities for the next year, and what are the top 3 things that council could help you do better, and then how many vacancies, and I don't know if there's other things we think of, and if we have a slide for each advisory board or committee that has that on it, and we have that as a starting point, then there can be a little bit more conversation about, okay, well, here's what these 15 groups are saying. what are the commonalities, and then are there any distinct things that one group is saying but none of the others are. But I think having some more of that front loaded will mean that we don't spend as much time going through those details at the beginning of the meeting. We can then have a conversation about what they've brought to us ahead of time.
Yeah, I think that's good. Let's do that, because the questions that we asked, it's not a big mystery. It's usually the
No,
same
it's
questions.
just-
pretty
yeah. It usually is, and
What have
that's
you been working on? What was your last project? What do you need from us? What do you have any, anything new coming
yeah,
up?
big ideas for the next year.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Minutes.
Participation maybe in some of the,
some things that council
events?
reports you've sent that we haven't
Yeah.
acted on.
so we should give them like 3 or 4 questions maybe. You're right.
I think that this type of systemization is really speaking towards what we've been talking about a lot, and also across the board, even as to like when we are getting contracts in, making sure that we are asking all those questions about like, are you an equal opportunity employer, et cetera, et cetera? Are you paying a livable wage? Anything we can do to prepare those items in advance and have them in the agenda so those aren't necessarily questions that have to come up during the meeting will really streamline it. And I absolutely love the idea of having a template that we could give to each of these community groups that they fill out so that we are seeing their side of things, but in a very streamlined way that we can compare apples to apples, if you will.
It's good, because it's not about us. It really is about the citizens of Greenbelt, the residents. So, and these advisory groups and community groups, and even the organizations that we serve as liaisons to, a reflection of the needs of Greenbelt. So I think this, yeah, got a couple of questions. Yes, please.
That I don't think we've completely talked about, and that is responses to community input. I know that in the meetings, minutes are taken and those remarks are written down. I would love for there to be a similar form that I can fill out, that Benita or Shania would during a meeting. If I'm talking to someone out in public and they have a really great idea, I would love a form that I can fill out that goes to Josue, and then he can send it to the right place. And I'm not bugging him with a million emails and a lot of background information. It's just a simple, I heard this. Can you look into this? And then it's like a yes or a no.
You said a form. Do you mean like an app?
Well,
Or
I
like,
mean, I
something
would
like a little
love
thing
an
in
app that
OneNote or
anyone
s-
in the community could go in, almost like is it the 311 for PGC?
Yeah, there are companies that do that, and we've received proposals. We don't have a Greenbelt app where you can, if you see a pothole or a leaking, you can take a picture of it, and there's a GPS coordinate, and you just send it to the city manager, and he shares it with Public Works, and that way there's a record, and we know exactly where it is. I don't know. There's a cost to doing something like that.
It goes to the record keeping. I would really love for there to be a systematized way of tracking that information, or those requests rather, so that we
Especially
stay
for
accountable to our
maintenance and
constituents.
things like that. It's a little different when someone's asking for some kind of has a complaint but yeah, I think we could do a little bit more with that.
Right, we don't have that. We're looking at software for Public Works as a work order system. Folks can report a broken sidewalk or something like that, but also things that are code enforcement. Currently, there's 2 separate departments and silos. It would be great to have a system that's integrated. So we are exploring it. We just haven't made a decision on the systems. There are two departments with completely different functions, and they're deep into that area of work, and they want to continue those services or those programs. How do we find a way to merge them all, or having one system that we can all agree to? But
Because Public Works does have a system where you can report like light outages and
so we have an internal system for things like if a bulb's out, which that one is out, so we're going to report that one. AC issues, things in the facilities, and then we have things out in the community that folks can log on through our website and submit those issues. But we don't have an app. It'd be great to have an app. In my last role, we had an app. There was also our asset management tool and mapping tool. So it was a very comprehensive tool. It worked easy in Ohio because we had a just a 3-ply paper that somebody filled out, and one copy went to one person, another copy went to another person. So we did a complete transformation. So it's easy to adopt one system that everyone would use.
We still have carbon paper.
They do.
I'm just saying. Well, you know, it used to be that apps were really expensive to develop. They're like, oh, we got to have an app, you know, like 10 years ago. But now we're at a place where an app or some sort of a tool that people, electronic or digital tool, is not quite as expensive to actually, it doesn't have to be developed from scratch. There's some tools that are out there. So I think it's-
Now we have off-the-shelf solutions that can be customized. So one of the websites providers, it's Appsility, that provide a web platform with an app that goes on devices that you can not just interact with your website, but also submit requests like 311 request and do case management through the app.
Kristen.
Yeah, when at the event that Glenn Ivy had at Schramm Hills on, what was that, Saturday?
Saturday.
I happened to be chatting with Nicole Williams and a staff person of Glen Ivy. I didn't catch her name, but they mentioned they have sort of a system to keep track of constituent requests, and I forget the name of it, and I don't know if I don't remember the name of it, unfortunately, but I don't know if that's because I think there might be some slight differences in something that's for like a work order for although maybe there's not, but you know, something like a work order like that light bulb is out versus this person has contacted about this, what has been happening with it. But that might, I don't know if that same system could work, if that's something, I wish I could remember the name of it, but they seemed to use it for if they had a contact from a constituent, it went in the system. And so then if that constituent then ended up talking to somebody else in the office, that other person could look up and see the history that had happened already, and they would have all the details right there. And that seems like that could be a good thing, that if there's a record of, because I know we're looking to hire someone who's focused on constituent services, but that if there were a system where maybe that person puts it in the system and then it's a public works issue, so public works can see the history of that, or if it's or cares could see the history of that if it ends up being there. And maybe Michael knows what the system that I'm talking about is called. I don't know.
Companies do the same thing. If you
Yep.
call and they can
Those are
exactly track who you talk to.
CRM systems. Marriott's a good example, have a really good system. They can track what every hotel you've been in. And now some hotels, you go into a room and as soon as you walk in, it's got your name on the screen. And yeah, that's so.
It's Mary Hilton too.
Hilton.
Well,
But I was going to say, I mean, in the interim, those apps and things do take time and money, but we could do a simple Microsoft form,
Yes, or Google Sheet.
that we collect because we are in Microsoft Office, where you can set up a form so that when you're on the phone, you can enter into the fields that we have. It goes into a database, so at least we have that. And then once the constituent relations person is on board, they could look at those to see, okay, we need to direct this one to this specific team within the city.
yeah.
Services.
And we have multiple points of entry. There's no wrong door to access our service. Just today, I got a call for Jaden Apartments, like infestation, all kinds of issues. I'm like, well, have you called code enforcement? And yes, but they won't listen. And so there's always a something going on, that there's a barrier. And so I think we gotta, when we have our constituent services person, and one of the things we will need to look at is what are all the points of entry for our constituents, for all the different things that they need.
City council, we get requests, and there's the expectation that we can solve a problem, but more often than not, we're working with you, we're working with staff to try and resolve it. But people have personal connections are very important. So I wouldn't expect our residents to necessarily go and enter something into a form. They still want to talk to council members about different things.
But we could put it in the
No,
form.
I was saying
We
us
just have
put
to
it in the
share
form.
it.
So if we have the conversation, we enter it
Share.
into the form, right?
Yeah.
There's a office list or something. There's something called Loop. There's some different tools that are out there.
There's a ton of tools out there. I think it's looking for the one that works for us. And so we need to aggregate all those different methods of how to contact, where to report a dead animal. maybe there's a cheat sheet for folks to.
Possum or something over in Strom Hills Park.
Possum was hurt. And then the county's,
They called
the county. But then I don't know. She said she was waiting around and nobody came. And then, but the second time she went back, the possum was gone. So sometimes possum kind of play like, you know, they say
dead.
a possum. They play, yeah, they play dead. And then, yeah, but it had like a little bit blood on it. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent with the Facebook. I only thought about the social media because it happens. Folks go on, post on social media, and somehow things get done. They don't know that a council member saw it, screenshot it, sent it to,
to you. That'd be me.
So posting it on social media doesn't magically make things happen. Like someone acts on it and took several steps to get it done. But you can.
Several.
Create that impression either. You know, if you have an issue or a problem, you really need to contact the city formally. And I mean, Facebook is a proprietary platform, and just because you post something doesn't mean that the city will necessarily see it in a timely fashion. I don't know how the algorithm for Facebook works, beats the heck out of me. But if you have a problem, you really need to call the city directly.
And you know, the
Call
other thing
or
that's
send an email or a text or come down here in person or talk to a council member.
But the other thing that's important that we're really not supposed to, you know, call Public Works and say, hey, you know, there is this or, you know, so we also have to be careful. So we have to go through the city manager. It has to come
And that's
through you.
explicitly spelled
So-
out in council rules. So
Yes,
we do not
we're
get
not allowed.
involved in the day-to-day activities of the city. That has to go through the city manager.
Yes, and I appreciate that, following those processes. Ultimately, if it's sent to the employee, it comes back to me and it just takes twice as long. Not because there's any delay, it's just that that person then have to send it to me and then I have to forward it to whoever it needs to go to.
Let's kind of wind down. Mr. Hartman, please.
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. Just real quickly, about the visions sessions or the town hall meetings or things of that nature. I think it's really important to really make an effort to encourage people to attend those. But I also think it's important to show how effective they are. And one of the ways to do that, without being self-serving for the council members, is to say, well, these are the ideas that came up in a session in 19 or 2008 or something, and someone suggested this, and we actually did it, so that people know that going to these sessions are effective and that something actually happens with it. Otherwise, you end up seeing the same people over and over again. You see Bill, me, Bob Rudd, whatever, whoever, but it's usually the same people who show up all the time. And I think it's really important to get other people's views. And the way to encourage that is to show how that showing up actually pays off, that their ideas actually pay off, and making a real effort to show that. Also, there's a lot of feedback forms online, and we have a feedback form at the cafe that is very effective and used very often. Usually, well, anyway. But I think, and you have a Facebook page, and you have other ways of getting feedback from people, and if you really encourage that, but also show that that issues that have been brought up have been addressed in the various forms. And so I think it's a good idea to have that maintenance thing for Public Works. And GHI has a maintenance page for members of GHI, and it works very effectively. So there's a lot of ways to do that. But anyway, getting more people and different people coming to these listings, town halls, even council meetings or work sessions, by doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, those are really good points. It's complicated. Resident engagement with the Buddy Attic master plan. We had the contractors come out, and they held 3 or 4 gatherings. And they had a pretty good turnout. It wasn't complete, though. We didn't have a lot of young people there. really young, like middle school students or anything there, and they certainly use the park quite a bit. With the ARPA funding, we sent out electronic messages to the mailing list, our email list. We've got about 9,000 people on the email list.
18,000.
18,000. So, it's really about reaching people where they are. I've talked a little bit about right now. We're doing some work in Franklin Park, going door to door, asking people what they think. Brought up really late in the game the idea of using some of the ARPA money to just go to every single door in Greenbelt and ask people, what they're thinking, develop some sort of a tool. Of course, we've used the University of Maryland to collate data from the survey that's taken during elections, election years. And that's kind of self-selecting. I mean, you're only getting people who vote, and you're only getting people who vote and choose to take the time to sit and fill out a survey for 15 minutes, because this is a rather long survey. Our former assistant city managers did a really great job with putting that together. I think we just have to, once again, there are a lot of different channels that we can use. And, after COVID, just thinking about getting a lot of people together in one way, it's not a talent, it's a skill. So instead of trying to develop outreach tools, I think we're better served by using a firm or using a contractor or something to develop tools, develop outreach methods, and how to do it. But I think it's important. But I don't think it's going to necessarily look like the way that we've done it in the past.
And it might not look the same way in every community in our city either. I mean, I think that it's really important as we move forward with the visioning that we're engaging with community leaders to make sure that we are really meeting people where they are, because what works best for us may not be what works best for people in the communities. We need to know how can we come to them? Like, what do they need? What are they looking for in a meeting? What makes it appealing for them? Because it might be different for people in Greenbelt Center than it is in Greenbelt East,
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, with the election, there's a presidential and a gubernatorial election coming up, and that's a time when more people tend to vote in those elections than in our municipal elections. I'm not sure why, but given that there is one coming up in November, that's an opportunity where a lot of our residents will be coming out, show their interest and support for just in the Senate and the president. So we need to think about how we're going to do this and to move ahead, not too fast, not too slow, but to get the best sort of responses that we possibly can. Councilmember McKinney, I'd like to leave it to you if you'd like to kind of put a ribbon on this, and we can.
I'm good. I think we have some good next steps that we've talked about today. I appreciate all of council's feedback and discussion and the openness and willingness of the discussion, as well as members of the community. And I hope for those that either are online or on Zoom or will watch the recording later, if there are other thoughts, we can go to council@greenbeltmd.gov for additional feedback and
Questions.
conversation and questions.
Council is
Council.
a better one to use, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank
as
you.
we wrap things up, I'm going to ask the city manager, is there anything coming up that's going to happen in the city over the next couple of days that are noteworthy?
We have this thing happening on Thursday. It's loud and a lot
What
of
date
lights.
is that going to be?
That's July 4th.
4th of July.
4th of July.
Oh, man. Well, how are things looking for the 4th of July?
We've been heavy in the preparations for a couple of weeks now. There's a great show lined up. We've made a couple changes to some operations to improve the safety. Previously, probably one of the things that our band participants are going to see is that previously we would allow vehicles to drive through the access road for where the band will play. That created a risk to have vehicles exposed to so many individuals without barriers. So we were now not allowing personal vehicles to access that area, but we are going to provide a club car to a passenger mover so that we can carry passengers and equipment. So we'll have a dedicated ranger transporting folks back and forth. So that's the balance we're looking for in terms of transportation and accessibility, but also ensuring the safety of our event goers, so we don't have a multi-ton vehicle just driving through.
Do we have a rain date?
What was that word you just used? It started with an R? Councilmember Poppy, how dare you?
Jinx it.
I'm just looking at the forecast.
No rain on that day.
It's only 35%.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to actually, because it's such a specialized thing. It's hard to do that.
Okay, well, I know the mayor's working hard on arranging the weather for that day, so
I've got some
I'll leave it to him.
Go over to Bladensburg on Friday or Laurel on Saturday is I think is the rain date. That's when their fireworks are happening. So
That will be Greenbelt's plan B.
Haven't scheduled a rain date. Our contract does allow for a rain date. We wouldn't be making the call. We'll let the pyrotechnics
That
crew
makes sense.
make the call, because if they do, then we can move that expense or that cost to another event. But obviously, we have professionals on site. If the weather doesn't permit for a safety execution of the event, then we'll reschedule.
Well, it's going to be a fabulous event. What's the timing? I know that the Greenbelt Concert Band will be performing. There's going to be a drum circle.
Drum circle, the concert band, and the fireworks show. There's activities there. There'll be food vendors. I don't remember the number, but a limited number. And the feature of the show, the fireworks, is expected to start at 9.
Okay. And the park is open, but the drum circle and whatnot. What time does that start?
drum circle. So it's on the city calendar. Arts and crafts 4 to 6 p.m. And then drum circle 5:30 to 6:45 is listed. Concert band 7:30 to 8:45 is listed, and fireworks display on the city calendar says dusk, but yeah, approximately 9 o'clock. So that's on the main city calendar that you can see on the homepage of the website.
Reminder, we haven't done mass marketing. We've posted it on social media and our 18,000 email subscribers. Our space is limited at Buddy Attic Park, but I imagine that word's gone out and we're going to be at capacity. College Park is not hosting their fireworks, so we'll have that crowd, that community that's probably looking for a great fireworks, and we have the best fireworks in the area. Mm-hmm.
Well, we do. It's the best 4th of July celebration. The fireworks are the best. Just the sense of community. It's a Greenbelt thing. It's powerful. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to thank our sister cities of Berwyn Heights and College Park for working with us on this issue with the fire departments. We're going to continue to work with our neighboring jurisdictions. There's so much concern, and just the way that we work with the county and just having good communication is very important, very important. So let's call it a night. Thank you so much.